Demon Souls turned 16 this year. It can legally drink beer in Germany without parent supervision, okay? And 16 years in the gaming world is a very long time. We talk about 2009, we talk about the middle of the PS3 era. And as a big fan of the Souls series, I didn't play it yet, so why not go through the game with a question? How does Demon Souls hold up in 2025? It's almost 2026 even, and is it worth it to play? I'm going to compare the games with the future games of the series, as I think most people are familiar with those, and I've been a very big fan and I played those first. So let's get back to the topic. Is the OG PS3 Demon Souls worth it to play? Now, first, I always thought that Demon Souls is a little bit of the forgotten game in the series. When it first got released, it didn't get the attention that the series would get later on, and therefore it's not very accessible because it was banished to the PS3 with no attention yet. And even with the remake for the PS5, I don't think that state really changed a lot because you know what problems the PS5 had. So I think nowadays the PS3 version is still more accessible, especially if you don't want to spend a lot of money. And that's how I played it, through legal emulation, of course. And long story short, I had a pretty good time. Now, I was prepared for the worst. If this is not your first game, you will feel it. So if you come from the Dark Souls series or even Elden Ring, you will feel the age of the game. But it was a lot better in a lot of aspects than I expected. It looks better than expected. It feels more familiar than expected. And it's way closer to the winning formula than I would have expected. That was a lot of expectations now. But it does feel very close to Dark Souls 1 in a lot of ways. Now, with the setting and the gameplay, the first game, so Demon Souls, builds a lot on the fundamentals that are still used now. And of course there's some differences. For example, you have lesser weapon types, but you have like the same loadout mechanic. You have a armor slot for your chest, leg, hands, headwear, whatever. 2 rings, attacking, dodging, everything works the same. You sadly still got the 4-way dodge. So when you lock on an enemy, you only got 4 ways to dodge, like back, forth, left, right, like in Dark Souls 1. But yeah, that was feeling very close to what I know. But there are also a lot of differences. Now, the small things first. You can't carry infinite items. You have a dude who takes your items, and you're gonna visit that guy a lot. You give him the stuff that you don't need because you can't really sell stuff. And with can't really, I mean you can't. Upgrading items was very strange, I thought, because it not only depends on your weapon type, it also depends on the build. So you have like a different upgrade ore for spears, a different upgrade ore for swords, and then you have different upgrades ores for elemental, quality build, heavy build, strength build, dexterity build, and your inventory can get very cluttered very quickly. And now the bigger differences of the game. The game is divided in 5 worlds, so you don't really progress the same way like you do in Dark Souls 1 or 2 or 3, where you can, just go along a path and you're kind of like steered into the general direction. No, you have 5 worlds, and for the most part you progress them up to a certain point and then go to another world. Now, I probably did it the way most people did it. I just went with World 1 first, then World 2 first. Second, of course, and maybe you could go to World 3 right away and finish it immediately. I don't know how it works exactly, but I just did it that way, and I progressed most worlds bit by bit, and then changed to another one, progressed there, went to another one, progressed there, and at the end of the world, you finish the world by defeating an archdemon, and that's when the world is done. But about the archdemons, I'm gonna elaborate later. Another big difference is healing items healing is a little bit different. Healing items are like in Bloodborne, they're consumable, but you can farm them. So I'm not sure if that makes that game essentially more difficult or less difficult, because yeah, you can run out of healing items at some very inconvenient points. But if you take the time out of your day and just farm for healing items, you can run around with like a 99 healing items. I personally, I only farmed for healing items, I think like 3 times, and I farmed for like maximum of like 30 minutes. It was okay. I do prefer the Estus thing, but it's not necessarily bad. I guess it's just a different decision. And yeah, I do like Estus. Now that I think back to Bloodborne, I really didn't like it there. I think Demon Souls was a little bit more generous, I would say. And when we talk about health already, the biggest difference and the one that I'm still not so sure about, once you die, half of your health is gone. Like, you're cursed. And getting your health back, it's not that easy. And it can get very complicated. So basically, you have two forms. You have the body form, where you have your full health, and you have the soul form, where you have only half your health. And basically, you lose your body form when you die, and that's it. The only way to get your body back is through an item that is pretty finite, I think. I'm not sure if you can farm it. I never looked for it. Or by defeating a boss. And honestly, there is one thing. I think like taking away half of your health pool for most of the time, that's really, really rough. Maybe I'm just bad because I didn't hold on to my body form and I didn't really use the item that gives you your body form back that much. But that was just my decision, right? There is one ring in the game that's called the clinging ring, or ring of clinging, or something like that, that basically reduced the penalty to just 1/3 of your health. I think that game is unplayable without that ring. So you can bet that I had that ring on for like most of my time playing. Thank God you get it in the first world in 1-1, in the first area of the first world. But yeah. Also, another thing that's very different from the Souls games is world tendency. I'm not gonna get too into it because first of all, it's very complicated, and second of all, I didn't really regarded it in my playthrough, I guess. But the whole gist of it is, you have a world tendency that can go from white to black, and things like dying in your body form, defeating bosses, changes certain events with NPCs and the world. Like, it changes in some minor ways. I think it's also affected by online ganking or like online invasions, and I don't know if it still works on a PS3, because I played on legal emulation and I didn't bother with it. I guess it was okay. Like, you can get through the game without knowing much about it, but I guess there was a reason why it was not used in the future games. But let's get back to the levels, okay? Another big change is you have no bonfires. You only have bonfires after you defeat a boss, and sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it does feel very horrible because you don't always have shortcuts. And basically, when you don't have a shortcut, that's very close, you have to go through the whole level to the boss. Your run back is basically the whole level. It sounds horrible. Most of the time, I felt it was okay. I didn't have that much of a problem. I made it sound way worse than it really is, but it's really okay. I thought it was okay. I still think that the way they handled bonfires in Dark Souls 1 was way better, but it's fine. Because most of the levels were very well designed. Like, the variety in structure and looks, they were very good. There were some ambushes that I thought were plain evil, but like, there was one time where I remember I was just walking around, and then I got ambushed by 2 red invaders on both sides at a very narrow path, and they were both super tanky and dealt a lot of damage. That was truly evil. But aside from that, I don't think the ambushes in that game were that bad. And I really enjoyed the level layouts. I enjoyed the way enemies were placed. You don't have any area where I thought, like, this is so horrible that I don't want to go there, aside from Valley of Defilement. Go figure, an area with the name of Valley of Defilement was not a joy to go through. But yeah, aside from that area, every world had its own charm. Pretty much, my favorite world was the final world. Like, the first world is also the final world, I guess. That's not a spoiler, by the way. There were some parts that I didn't like though, because for certain enemies, um, there's some certain enemies that literally block your way, and that's not too bad. But the thing that annoyed me was that they are resistant to physical damage. So if you don't have anything else but physical damage on you, you're gonna spend a lot of time knocking down a literal sandbag of an enemy, because they take a lot of punishment. And this is not like Dark Souls 1 resistance. I'm not talking about, oh, you're attacking the Iron Golem with a cut weapon, like heavy armored enemies strong against cut damage. No, no, no. I'm talking about a damage. I'm talking about an enemy that receives next to no damage. Someone that has thousands of health and only receives like double-digit damage. That's what I'm talking about. That sometimes sucks. That happened only in one area, I guess. So it's fine, I think. About the enemy variety, they were okay. At some point, I felt there were a lot of enemies that have this one spell that pushes you back and deals a lot of damage, and they are placed at mostly cliffs and stuff. And there's this one enemy type that's called a Mind Flayer. Fuck that enemy, okay? They were always placed and found in the worst vile areas and places, okay? Fuck those enemy types. But aside from that little thing, I thought most of the enemies were fine. Now bosses. Bosses are not the highlight. Unlike in later entries, like for example, I felt the real game where they became real attractions, where I was like, oh, I wonder what the next boss is, was Dark Souls 3 and Dark Souls 2 in some aspects, but mostly Dark Souls 3, I think. But in this game, they're not the highlight. Many of them are fairly simple, and many of them I did beat first try. And the way to get to the boss is more dangerous, but also more fun. It's definitely something they improved on in Dark Souls 1. And one thing that I really didn't like is that some bosses are pretty much undoable unless you're higher leveled. Some of them have very absurd resistances if you don't have the right weapon. For example, I remember there was a boss that I got there. I looked it up. He has 3,720 health, but my weapon only dealt 15 damage. I looked it up. Apparently, my level was not really the issue. I was slightly under-leveled, but not by a lot. Like, I'm talking about like 3 levels maybe. But the boss required a different type of weapon, because that boss resisted physical damage. I mean, you could say, of course, yeah, skill issue, yes, but not really. It feels like you were forced to use an elemental weapon at some point. And maybe it's also because of the non-linear worlds where you have the choice. You can go to any world, that things like that can happen. But you know, I felt like the developers wanted to tell sorry, I'm doing this off the top of my dome for the most part. I felt like the developers wanted to tell me that, hey, how about you go to a different area now? And well, that's what I did. I just returned when I felt I got a little bit stronger, a better weapon, better equipment. You know what I'm talking about. Now, I mentioned the Archdemons earlier. They appear at the end of every world, and they're supposed to be, I guess, the highlights. I mean, you can't put something at the end of a world and call it Archdemon and not have players assume that they're the highlight, because they are grandiose, they're big, they're huge, they're always, you know, they're the big bad bosses. But all but one Archdemon fight are gimmick fights, so they're kind of easy. And honestly, I'm not really a fan of gimmick fights. Oh, maybe I should explain what I mean with a gimmick fight. I mean something like Yorm from Dark Souls 3 with the Storm Ruler. I guess that's a gimmick fight, and most of them were gimmick fights, or something like that one dragon fight from Dark Souls 3. Not the dragon, but Archdragon's Peak, where you have to traverse the whole level and then plunge attack that one enemy. I forgot its name, but yeah, like those are gimmick fights. I don't like gimmick fights because they just don't interact with your build, which I generally don't like, because you spent your whole game building your character, and then you have a boss that doesn't interact with your build at all. But I get it, like they tried to keep it fresh, so you know, they tried some different stuff, but it was alright. Switching worlds in itself always felt like a variety in itself, so I guess that was also a very kind of a good aspect of that concept, even though I like something more linear. I didn't mind it though. Like I think open world is a little bit more tedious than that. Um yeah, unlike the other Souls game that are notorious for having certain parts that are better, I felt this game was very balanced. I mean, maybe because you can choose to which world you go. It's not like you can say like in Dark Souls 1 where you say, oh, the beginning is amazing, but Lost Izalith and upwards sucks. Or like in Dark Souls 3 where it's the other way around, where you say like, oh, in the early it's kind of sucky, but later on it gets really cool. No, I felt this was very balanced, but this also because you can choose your path. Every area was kind of cool aside Valley of Defilement, go figure. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I didn't want to spoil in this video because, you know, if I spoil it, would you play it? Probably not. So I tried to keep it as spoiler free as I can. So to close it all out, is the game worth it? The game does feel like a hardcore experience. And sure, there are some mechanics that feel like more of a nuisance than a difficulty. But if you just use those mechanics to your advantage, it's okay. You're definitely more forced to adapt your build and your way of playing than in the future games where you have a little bit more freedom. But that doesn't affect your sorry, that didn't affect my enjoyment that much. But this game doesn't hold your hand a lot, and I like that. I like that. There's not a lot of hand holding in this game, even less than in Dark Souls 1, and this game also makes me understand why Dark Souls 1 marketing branded itself so much with the prepare to die, the most difficult game in the world, blah, blah, blah. Because this game, honestly, the first playthrough of this game is probably the most difficult experience for a Souls game that I had. And yeah, I beat Promised Console Rodan pre-nerf, I did it. But as a base game, I thought for the first time, this is probably the most difficult game, and no, Sekiro is not a Souls-like. So yes, this game definitely gets a recommendation from me. Look for the best way for you for legal emulation, or PS3. Get a PS3, get it cheap somewhere for maybe $50. I don't know, maybe that's feasible. So yeah, I can recommend it. Definitely go play it, enjoy it, have a good time with it.